Mauna Kea is a dormant volcano on the island of Hawaii. Standing 4,207 meters above sea level, its peak is the highest point in the state of Hawaii. Much of the mountain is underwater. When measured from its oceanic base, Mauna Kea is over 10,000 meters tall, making it the world's tallest mountain from base to summit, beating out even Mount Everest. Mauna Kea is about 1 million years old, and has thus passed the most active shield stage of life hundreds of thousands of years ago. In its current post-shield state, its lava is more viscous, resulting in a steeper profile. Late volcanism has also given it a much rougher appearance than its neighboring volcanoes. Contributing factors include the construction of cinder cones, the decentralization of its rift zones, the glaciation on its peak, and the weathering effects of the prevailing trade winds. Mauna Kea last erupted 6,000 to 4,000 years ago and is now considered dormant. In Hawaiian mythology, the peaks of the island of Hawaii are sacred. An ancient law allowed only high-ranking alii to visit its peak. Ancient Hawaiians living on the slopes of Mauna Kea relied on its extensive forests for food, and quarried the dense volcano-glacial basalts on its flanks for tool production. When Europeans arrived in the late 18th century, settlers introduced cattle, sheep and game animals, many of which became feral and began to damage the mountain's ecology. Mauna Kea can be ecologically divided into 3 sections: an alpine climate at its summit, a Sophora chrysophylla myoporum sanwachense forest on its flanks, and an acacia koa metrosideros polymorpha forest, now mostly cleared by the former sugar industry, at its base. In recent years, concern over the vulnerability of the native species has led to court cases that have forced the Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources to eradicate all feral species on the mountain. With its high altitude, dry environment, and stable airflow, Mauna Kea's summit is one of the best sites in the world for astronomical observation. Since the creation of an access road in 1964, 13 telescopes funded by 11 countries have been constructed at the summit. The Mauna Kea observatories are used for scientific research across the electromagnetic spectrum from visible light to radio, and comprise the largest such facility in the world. The construction on a sacred landscape continues to be a topic of debate. Geology. Mauna Kea is one of 5 hotspot volcanoes that form the island of Hawaii, the largest and youngest island of the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount chain. Of these 5 volcanoes, Mauna Kea is the 4th oldest and 4th most active. It began as a pre-shield volcano driven by the Hawaii hotspot around 1 million years ago, and became exceptionally active during its shield stage until 500,000 years ago. Mauna Kea entered its quieter post-shield stage 250,000 to 200,000 years ago, and is currently dormant. Mauna Kea does not have a visible summit caldera, but contains a number of small cinder and pumice cones near its summit. A former summit caldera may have been filled and buried by later summit eruption deposits. Mauna Kea is over 3,200 cubic kilometers in volume, so massive that it and its neighbor, Mauna Loa, depress the ocean crust beneath it by 6 kilometers. The volcano continues to slip and flatten under its own weight at a rate of less than 0.2 millimeters per year. Much of its mass lies east of its present summit. Mauna Kea stands 4,205 meters above sea level, just 35 meters higher than its neighbor Mauna Loa, and is the highest point in the state of Hawaii. Measured from its base on the ocean floor, it rises over 10,000 meters, significantly greater than the elevation of Mount Everest above sea level. Like all Hawaiian volcanoes, Mauna Kea has been created as the Pacific tectonic plate has moved over the Hawaiian hotspot spot in the Earth's underlying mantle. The Hawaii Island volcanoes are the most recent evidence of this process that, over 70 million years, has created the 6,000 kilometers long Hawaiian Ridge Emperor Seamount chain. The prevailing, though not completely settled, view is that the hot spot has been largely stationary within the planet's mantle for much, if not all, of the Cenozoic era. However, while Hawaiian volcanism is well understood and extensively studied, there remains no definite explanation of the mechanism that causes the hot spot effect. Lava flows from Mauna Kea overlapped in complex layers with those of its neighbors during its growth. Most prominently, Mauna Kea is built upon older flows from Kohala to the northwest, and intersects the base of Mauna Loa to the south. The original eruptive fissures in the flanks of Mauna Kea were buried by its post-shield volcanism. Kilo Ridge, a prominent underwater rift zone structure east of Mauna Kea, was once believed to be a part of the volcano. However, it is now understood to be a rift zone of Kohala that has been affected by younger Mauna Kea flows. The shield stage lavas that built the enormous main mass of the mountain of thalliatic basalts, like those of Mauna Loa, created through the mixing of primary magma and subducted oceanic crust. They are covered by the oldest exposed rock strata on Mauna Kea, the post-shield alkali basalts of the Hamakua volcanics, which erupted between 250,000 and 70–65,000 years ago. The most recent volcanic flows are Hawaii.Much and Marguerites. They are the post-shield Laupahoeho volcanics, erupted between 65,000 and 4,000 years ago. These changes in lava composition accompanied the slow reduction of the supply of magma to the summit, which led to weaker eruptions that then gave way to isolated episodes associated with volcanic dormancy. The Laupahoeho lavas are more viscous and contain more volatiles than the earlier thalliatic basalts. The thicker flows significantly steepened Mauna Kea's flanks. In addition, explosive eruptions have built cinder cones near the summit. These cones are the most recent eruptive centers of Mauna Kea. Its present summit is dominated by lava domes and cinder cones up to 1.5 kilometers in diameter and hundreds of meters tall. Mauna Kea is the only Hawaiian volcano with distinct evidence of glaciation. Similar deposits probably existed on Mauna Loa, but have been covered by later lava flows. Despite Hawaii's tropical location, during several past ice ages a drop of only a degree in temperature allowed snow to remain at the mountain's summit through summer, triggering the formation of an ice cap. There are 3 episodes of glaciation that have been recorded from the last 180,000 years: the Poakuloa, Waihu and Makanaka series. These have extensively sculpted the summit, depositing moraines and a circular ring of till and gravel along the mountain's upper flanks. Subglacial eruptions built cinder cones during the Makanaka glaciation, most of which were heavily gouged by glacial action. The most recent cones were built between 9,000 and 4,500 years ago, atop the glacial deposits, although one study indicates that the last eruption may have been around 3,600 years ago. At the maximum extent, the glaciers extended from the summit down to between 3,200 and 3,800 meters of elevation. A small body of permafrost, less than 25 meters across, was found at the summit of Mauna Kea prior to 1974, and may still be present. Small gullies etch the summit, formed by rain and snow-fed streams that flow only during winter melt and rain showers. On the windward side of the mountain, stream erosion driven by trade winds has accelerated erosion in a manner similar to that on older Kohala. Mauna Kea is home to Lake Waiau, the highest lake in the Pacific Basin. At an altitude of 3,969 meters, it lies within the Hawaii.Standing and is the only alpine lake in Hawaii. The lake is very small and shallow, with a surface area of 0.73 hectares and a depth of 3 meters. Radiocarbon dating of samples at the base of the lake indicates that it was clear of ice 12,600 years ago. Hawaiian lava types are typically permeable, preventing the formation of lakes due to infiltration. Here, either sulfur-bearing steam altered the volcanic ash to low permeability clays, or explosive interactions between rising magma and groundwater as surface water formed exceptionally fine ash that also would reduce the permeability of the lakebed. Until 1993, artesian water was not known to be present in the island of Hawaii. Drilling by the University of Hawaii at the time encountered an artesian groundwater aquifer at 300 meters below sea level and 100 meters of hole depth within a compacted layer of soil and lava where the flows of both Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea meet. Isotopic composition shows the water present to have been derived from rain coming off Mauna Kea at an elevation higher than 2,000 meters above mean sea level. Its presence is attributed to a freshwater head within Mauna Kea's basal lens. Scientists believe there may be more water in Mauna Kea's freshwater lens than current models may indicate. In 2012, 2 more boreholes were drilled on Mauna Kea and water discovered at much higher elevations than previously believed but shallower than expected. Donald Thomas, director of the University of Hawaii's Center for the Study of Active Volcanoes, believes one reason to continue study of the aquifers is due to use and occupancy of the higher elevation areas, stating, "Nearly all of these activities depend on the availability of potable water that, in most cases, must be trucked to the saddle from Waimea Hilo, an inefficient and expensive process that consumes a substantial quantity of our scarce liquid fuels." Future activity. The last eruption of Mauna Kea was about 4,600 years ago. Because of this inactivity, Mauna Kea is assigned a United States Geological Survey hazard listing of 7 for its summit and 8 for its lower flanks, out of the lowest possible hazard rating of 9. 20% of the volcano's summit has seen lava flows in the past 10,000 years, and its flanks have seen virtually no lava flows during that time. Despite its dormancy, Mauna Kea is expected to erupt again, although there would be sufficient warning to evacuate. The telescopes on Mauna Kea's summit would be the first to detect the minute amounts of deformation resulting from the volcano's swelling, acting like expensive altimeters. Based on prior eruptions, such an event could occur anywhere on the volcano's upper flanks and would likely produce extended lava flows, mostly of AA of 15 to 25 kilometers in length. Long periods of activity could build a cinder cone at the source. Although not likely in the next few centuries, such an eruption would probably result in little loss of life but significant damage to infrastructure. Human history. Native history. The first ancient Hawaiians to arrive on Hawaii Island lived along the shores, where food and water were plentiful. Settlement expanded inland to the Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea region in the 12th and early 13th centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests that these regions were used for hunting, collecting stone material, and possibly for spiritual reasons or for astronomical and navigational observations. The mountains' plentiful forest provided plants and animals for food and raw materials for shelter. Flightless birds that had previously known no predators became a staple food source. Early settlement of the Hawaiian Islands led to major changes to local ecosystems and many extinctions, particularly amongst bird species. Ancient Hawaiians brought foreign plants and animals, and their arrival arrival was associated with increased rates of erosion. The prevailing lowland forest ecosystem was transformed from forest to grassland. Some of this change was caused by the use of fire, but the prevailing cause of forest ecosystem collapse and avian extinction on Hawaii appears to have been the introduction of the Polynesian rat. The summits of the 5 volcanoes of Hawaii are revered as sacred mountains, and Mauna Kea's summit, the highest, is the most sacred. For this reason, a kapu restricted visitor rights to high-ranking ali. Hawaiians associated elements of the natural environment with particular deities. In Hawaiian mythology, the summit of Mauna Kea was seen as the region of the gods, a place where benevolent spirits reside. Poliahu, deity of snow, also resides there. In Hawaiian, Mauna Kea means white mountain, a reference to its summit, which can be frequently covered in snow. Around AD 1100, natives established adze quarries high up on Mauna Kea to extract the uniquely dense basalt to make tools. Volcanic glass and gabbro were collected for blades and fishing gear, and mamane wood was preferred for the handles. At peak quarry activity after AD 1400, there were separate facilities for rough and fine cutting, shelters with food, water, and wood to sustain the workers, and workshops creating the finished product. Lake Waiau provided drinking water for the workers. Native chiefs would also dip the umbilical cords of newborn babies in its water, to give them the strength of the mountain. Use of the quarry declined between this period and contact with Americans and Europeans. As part of the ritual associated with quarrying, the workers erected shrines to the gods. These and other quarry artifacts remain at the sites, most of which lie within what is now the Mauna Kea Ice Age Reserve. This early era was followed by peace and cultural expansion between the 12th and late 18th century. Land was divided into regions designed for both the immediate needs of the populace and the long-term welfare of the environment. These ahapura generally took the form of long strips of land oriented from the mountain summits to the coast. Mauna Kea's summit was encompassed in the ahapura of Kauai'chi, with part of its eastern slope reaching into the nearby Humula. Principal sources of nutrition for Hawaiians living on the slopes of the volcano came from the Mamene forest of its upper slopes, which provided them with vegetation and bird life. Bird species hunted included the uau, nene, and palila. The lower Kaoeohea forest gave the natives wood for canoes and ornate bird feathers for decoration. Modern era, there are 3 accounts of foreigners visiting Hawaii before the arrival of James Cook in 1778. However, the earliest Western depictions of the isle, including Mauna Kea, were created by explorers in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Contact with Europe and America had major consequences for island residents. Native Hawaiians were devastated by introduced diseases. Port cities including Hilo, Kilauea, and Kailua grew with the establishment of trade, and the adze quarries on Mauna Kea were abandoned after the introduction of metal tools. In 1793, cattle were brought by George Vancouver as a tribute to King Kamehameha I. By the early 19th century, they had escaped confinement and roamed the island freely, greatly damaging its ecosystem. In 1809, John Palmer Parker arrived and befriended Kamehameha I, who put him in charge of cattle management on the island. With an additional land grant in 1845, Parker established Parker Ranch on the northern slope of Mauna Kea, a large cattle ranch that is still in operation today. Settlers to the island burned and cut down much of the native forest for the construction of sugarcane plantations and houses. The Saddle Road, named for its crossing of the saddle-shaped plateau between Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, was completed in 1943, and eased travel to Mauna Kea considerably. The Po'akulo training area on the plateau is the largest military training ground in Hawaii. The 108,863-acre base extends from the volcano's lower flanks to 2,070 meters elevation, on state land leased to the U.S. Army since 1956. There are 15 threatened and endangered plants, 3 endangered birds, and 1 endangered bat species in the area. Mauna Kea has been the site of extensive archaeological research since the 1980s. Approximately 27% of the science reserve had been surveyed by 2000, identifying 76 shrines, 4 adze manufacturing workshops, 3 other markers, 1 positively identified burial site, and 4 possible burial sites. By 2009, the total number of identified sites had risen to 223, and archaeological research on the volcano's upper flanks is ongoing. It has been suggested that the shrines, which are arranged around the volcano's summit along what may be an ancient snow line, are markers for the transition to the sacred part of Mauna Kea. Despite many references to burial around Mauna Kea in Hawaiian oral history, few sites have been confirmed. The lack of shrines or other artifacts on the many cinder cones dotting the volcano may be because they were reserved for burial. Since in pre-contact times, natives traveling up Mauna Kea were probably guided more by landscape than by existing trails, as no evidence of the latter has been found. It is possible that natural ridges and water sources were followed instead. Individuals likely took trips up Mauna Kea's slopes to visit family-maintained shrines near its summit, and traditions related to ascending the mountain exist to this day. However, very few natives actually reached the summit, because of the strict kapu placed on it. In the early 19th century, the earliest notable recorded ascents of Mauna Kea included the following. On August 26, 1823, Joseph F. Goodrich, an American missionary, made the first recorded ascent in a single day. However, a small arrangement of stones he observed suggested he was not the first human on the summit. He recorded 4 ecosystems as he traveled from base to summit, and also visited Lake Waiau. On June 17, 1825, an expedition from HMS Blonde, led by botanist James McCrae, reached the summit of Mauna Kea. McCrae was the first person to record the Mauna Kea silver sword, saying, "The last mile was destitute of vegetation except one plant of the Sigenaisia tribe, in growth much like a yucca, with sharp-pointed silver-colored leaves and green upright spike of 3 or 4 feet, producing pendulous branches with brown flowers. Truly superb, and almost worth the journey of coming here to see it on purpose." In January 1834, David Douglas climbed the mountain and described extensively the division of plant species by altitude. On a second climb in July, he was found dead in a pit intended to catch wild cattle. Although murder was suspected, it was probably an accidental fall. The site, Ka Luakauka, 19.88806 degrees north, 155.33806 degrees west, 19.88806 minus 155.33806, is marked by the Douglas fir trees named for him. In 1881, Queen Emma traveled to the peak to bathe in the waters of Lake Waiau during competition for the role of ruling chief of the Kingdom of Hawaii. On August 6, 1889, Edie Baldwin left Hilo and followed cattle trails to the summit. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, trails were formed, often by the movement of game herds, that could be traveled on horseback. However, vehicular access to the summit was practically impossible until the construction of a road in 1964, and it continues to be restricted. Today, multiple trails to the summit exist, in various states of use.